Welcome everybody to another live session of our lecture Management and Leadership. Last time we talked about different kind of models and management in the chapter Management Yesterday and Today, and we were giving the example of the ancient pyramids and the building of the Great Wall of China as early examples for very also sophisticated management from the perspective of those days, because management, we said, simply defined, is to coordinate work activities of others and to work with and through other people in order to achieve companies' objectives. And of course you needed to do that in order to build the pyramids or the Great Wall. And then we discussed different kind of models, so Fayol's principles of management and Taylor. And now we come to another one, which is Weber's ideal bureaucracy model. And this ideal bureaucracy model is comprised of different kind of factors. So first of all, you can see again here this division of labor principle, which has been brought into the discussion. You still remember that? By Adam Smith long ago in 1776 in his groundbreaking work Wealth of Nations. Wealth of Nations, he advocated this division of labor, which is also picked up by Weber in this model. When it comes to authority hierarchy, he claimed that positions organized in a hierarchy with a clear chain of command. So you also have these principles of Fayol in here, that you have a clear chain of command, that it shall not be any kind of misunderstanding. So you always have a direct communication towards one superior person. So, and this is quite a formal process. So this bureaucracy model was a kind of a blueprint for how organizations and enterprises should be set up. Then you can also have here again Fayol principles in here, or principles of scientific management. Formal selection. People shall be selected for jobs based on technical qualifications. You have here this modern, very still contemporary approach of on the one hand side, the qualification profile of a person, and on the other hand side, the job profile. So, and it should be a formal selection by finding the best people suitable for the specific tasks. So this is a very modern contemporary approach in which you just compare the job description and the qualification profile of the applicant. There should be also formal rules and regulations. So a system of written rules and standard operating procedures. You have this modern approach of quality management in here already, in which you have quality handbooks which lay down certain kind of processes in the organization. For example, what kind of steps are involved when it comes to complaints of customers, or how you handle how you're handling orders coming in. It should be impersonal, meaning there should be a uniform application, so a standard application of rules and controls, not according to any kind of personality. So it should be fair and objective. So of course this feeds in here as well. And the last element being the career orientation. Managers are career professionals, not owners of the units they manage. So they strive, of course, for advancing in the organizations, but they're not the owners of the divisions they are heading, of course. Okay, that was this model here, which is still, you find a lot of interesting and contemporary elements in that. And let's go on. Next slide. Yes. Hitherto, it has all been very much technical. So the studies are mainly, if I go back on one more or two more slides back again, going back to the overview, which we already discussed here, you can see we discussed the historical background, and then we discussed classical approaches. But modern approaches or behavioral approaches, they are more focusing on modern elements which is, for example, also in the Fayol's Esprit de Corps, which we discussed last time as well. So those kind of studies, they try to understand organizational behavior. So what is organizational behavior? Organizational behavior is the understanding and the appreciation of activities of all the individuals and people who are employed at an organization or at an enterprise. So people are the most important assets of an organization, not the technical equipment. So not the machinery, the land, the capital. And there are some early advocates, researchers, who dealt exclusively and explicitly with organizational behavior. So trying to understand more the psychological concepts behind how an organization works. Robert Owen was one, Münsterberg, etc., etc. So let's look at the most important study in this respect, which is here's an overview about when those studies have been carried through, and you can see here these early advocates. They had different kind of focuses here. So Owen was late 1700s. So he was concerned about deplorable working conditions, and he was one of the first ones who actually took into consideration, okay, what kind of effect does the workplace, the physical environment, has on the productivity of the worker. So he argued that money spent improving the labor conditions is a very smart investment. Hitherto, or prior to Owen's times, people were more focusing on the technical approach, which is, as long as you have enough machinery and you have enough working capital and capital being employed in the organization, everything is fine. So he was one of the very early advocates of what is very modern and standard today. We also had that at Shell, that people are going through the organization, also observing how people are sitting in front of the computer, if there's enough natural light coming in from the outside, etc., etc. So you already paid attention to that. One of the next ones was in the early 1900s was Münsterberg, and he was a pioneer in the field of psychology when it comes to the organizations. And he really scientifically studied people while working. And what did he find out? He suggested to use psychological tests for the selection of the employees, not only to look for a match or a mismatch between the worker's profile, so qualification profile, and the job profile, but also look at psychological tests and results to select people. For example, when it comes to also promoting people, he said you have to be resistant towards stress, and he was suggesting certain kind of tests in order to find that out. So he suggested using psychological tests for employee selection, learning theory concepts for the training, and the study of human behavior when it comes to the motivation. So he was very much basing his research and his work on Owen's work. And Mary Parker Follett was one of the women researchers who was looking in the organizational behavior field, and she was one of the first to recognize that organizations could be viewed from the perspective of individual behavior and from the group behavior. So she was not only looking at the collection of certain kind of individuals in departments, but she was also looking at the individual behavior and how this individual behavior constitutes group behavior or influences group behavior. She proposed more people-oriented ideas than scientific management. So, like I explained before, scientific management was more about the science of increasing productivity, while stopping the workers with watches, trying to improve their movement and activities in the production process. So it was all very much technically based. And she was very much stressing, as Munsterberg as well, stressing the importance of psychological factors and on the organizational behavior of individual people. Chester Barnard in the 1930s was actually a manager who thought organizations were some kind of social glue, social systems that required effective cooperation among the participants. He believed that manager's job was basically to communicate and to stimulate employees' higher levels of effort. So he said that management is a lot about this, what we said at the beginning, coordinating the work activities, also through motivation, through the psychological also aspects here. And he was one of the first ones to argue that organizations shall be run and managed as open systems. So they influence the environment, but they're also influenced by the environment. So we discussed that in another lecture in business administration, this systems approach, but we'll follow up on that a couple of slides later on as well. So one of the most influential studies of all time when it comes to management was the Hawthorne Studies. And the Hawthorne Studies, they were carried out at General Electric some while ago in 1927. And first it was conceptualized as being a quantitative approach. So they try to use quantitative techniques coming from scientific management to improve decision making. And they change different kind of working conditions. So it was a series actually of productivity experiments done at General Electric during those days. But what it found out was it got tremendous effects when it comes to organizational behavior and group behavior and individual behavior. So the findings were that the productivity increased, but unexpectedly, under imposed adverse working conditions. So when they changed the working conditions of people, they had different kind of productivities, and the effect of incentive plans actually was less than expected. So we remember probably that Fayol have this fair pay and has some kind of incentives that should be given to workers. But the Hawthorne Studies found out that financial incentives being paid to workers are less effective than originally expected. So when it comes to motivation of people. So the conclusion was in the end that, and that is the most important thing, that social norms, group standards, attitudes, so all these psychological factors that were looked at by the researchers who are dealing with organizational behaviors, they have a much stronger, a more strong influence on the individual and also on the group output than any kind of monetary incentives. And today we know that, of course. But during those days, it was kind of new because when it comes to the assembly line and the production during those days, there was solely the focus on how can we improve the work processes, how can we get people producing more cars or whatever, more screws or more chairs or more shirts, and we have to pay them better, or we have to pay per unit they are producing, etc., etc. But less attention was given or was spent on the working conditions, on psychological aspects, and this completely changed with these Hawthorne studies and the whole research which was done on in the framework of organizational behavior. I talked about that before, the systems approach, and that organizations should be seen as open systems. So first, what is a system? A system can be defined as a set of interrelated and interdependent parts arranged in a manner that produces a unified whole. So some kind of a product or some kind of a service. And there are basically two sorts, two dimensions, two categories of systems. One, closed systems. They are not influenced by and do not interact with the environment. So all system input and output is basically internal. But the systems approach in a contemporary view calls for organizations to be seen as open systems. So they dynamically interact with the environment by taking in inputs and transforming them into outputs that are distributed into their environments. So that is, of course, a bit theoretical. But let me give you one example. So, of course, we are taking inputs from the world around us. So we are not only taking inputs when it comes to producing products. So we need wood, for example, to produce furniture, or we need cotton to produce shirts. But also we are taking in people from the job market, from the labor market. We are taking in money, of course, from the financial markets. But also we are influenced by the culture which surrounds us and by different kind of market competitors. So, but all too often, companies are managed as closed systems. They are managed as an island, and management often fails to have a more encompassing view. What is meant by that? I don't know whether I told you the story about that. So we had a while ago, Shell had a product, and it still has the product at the sites. We were inventing 𝗍𝗵𝗴𝗆. We were trying to differentiate a homogeneous product, so which is fuel, in order to be different from 𝗟𝗲 and 𝗵𝗶. And we came out with 𝗍𝗵𝗴, and we said, oh, 𝗍𝗵𝗴 is V for victory, and there was the association between Shell and Ferrari and Michael Schumacher. And we came with a suggestion and with a customer value proposition. We call that CVP, customer value proposition. Customer value proposition. We came out with the idea of that you have a better performance, so the engine performs better because 𝗍𝗵𝗴 has 100 octane, and you also the car consumes less fuel, so it saves you about 2 to 3%. I don't know the precise number. It saves you about 2 to 3% fuel as well if you fill it in the car. And of course we are looking at the customer, and we launched a product into the market, and it was a big success. But then we failed to look at all the stakeholders which surrounded us. So stakeholders in management, stakeholders are all the interest groups of an organization. Interest groups. Who has got examples for stakeholders? Who are stakeholders to an organization? Who are the stakeholders of an organization? Can you enumerate some of them? Customers, yes. Customers was yes, and yeah, environment is a very broad thing, of course, but customers, suppliers, who else? The media, for example. Government, very good, Mr. 𝗍𝗀𝗀𝗀. Government. Anything else? Also competitors, and also more or less eventually powerful lobby groups. And one of these lobby groups which was relevant for Shell is the ADAC, which still has the biggest magazine available in Europe with more than 11 million subscribers, 𝗟𝗲V𝗴𝗆. And the ADAC, after we launched 𝗍𝗵𝗴𝗆, they came along and said, oh, Shell was lying to the people. So it was not 2 to 3% fuel saving. It actually is much less. It's around 1.2%. I don't know the exact number, so I forgot that. But they said, oh, the claim of Shell is not right. Who was correct? Actually, interestingly, both were being correct. Why were those two people being correct? Because what Shell did, what we did, we took only latest cars. We took only modern cars with contemporary engines. So we were not taking supercars. So we were taking normal cars like Volkswagen Golf, also Fiat Cinquecento, and I don't know, Opel Adam, whatever, also Ferrari and Porsche. But always very, very modern cars. And 𝗍𝗲𝗃 said, look at the world around you. This is not very fair, because there are also cars which are 30 years old. And those cars, and they're different. Why? Because they lack what we call a sensor which tracks how much octane is in the fuel you put into the car. So when you test it with the modern cars, you have a saving. Yes. So the car actually consumes less fuel. But if you fill it into an old car, which lacks the sensor, it's giving you nothing. It's giving you 0% saving. Nothing at all. So what happened in the end, both were correct from their perspective, but the 𝗍𝗃𝗃, they were very harsh in their criticism, and we had a problem because we were not taking them into consideration. We were too much I don't know, focusing on the customer, focusing on ourselves, but we were less sensitive when it comes to all the stakeholders which have an influence on our business from a management perspective, from a wider perspective. And to cut a long story short, what we did was we apologized and we went to the 𝗍𝗃𝗃 people and we said, okay, let's take your engineers, let's take our engineers, let's put them together in one room, and we reformulate the fuel, the V-power, and we are. I was a bit confused because there was some pop-up from the chat room. So what we did was we relaunched the V-power and we said co-created, co-developed with the 𝗍𝗃𝗃, and then it was okay. But after initial success, we lost millions of dollars because the people were a bit offended and the people were angry with Shell. And why was that? Because, like I said, because we were less sensitive, because we were not so much in a position to manage the organization or to see an organization as an open system, which is always influenced and influencing the broader environment. And now I quickly want to look at a kind of a question which was popping up, I think, here in the chat room. You can always ask me, so please feel free to interrupt. Different test conditions, stakeholders. So basically, here we can see again a difference between a very, very important difference between different kind of management concepts. So one is, turn on the blackboard here. Oh, it's really a nice blackboard. We can see the nice like writing with a chalk here. So the difference between stakeholder management and also shareholder value management. Stakeholder value management and shareholder value management. So that is a kind of not contradicting, but if you know, most organizations in today's world, they pursue what we call a stakeholder value management perspective. They have a stakeholder, they have a shareholder value management focus, which means they try to concentrate their managerial actions to maximize the value for the shareholder. But the problem is, of course, that they fall short when it comes to other influence groups, when it comes to other interest groups that have an impact on the organization, which is all the stakeholders, interest groups, Interessengruppen. So shareholders are also stakeholders, but only one group. And stakeholder management perspective means you try to take into consideration what kind of implications your strategic actions and managerial actions have, not only on the customer, not only on the company, but also on the broader, the macro environment. So all participants, so all kind of stakeholders to the organization. So that is a big difference. That is a very, very important difference that we now discussed. So here you can see it again as a graph, the organization as an open system. So it is taking inputs, like mentioned, from like raw materials, human resources, capital, technology, but also information. And it is, of course, interacting with the environment. It is influenced by the environment, and therefore it has to pay careful consideration to how the environment and its stakeholders are also impacting the organization. We can see in today's world that there is a big influence of the media, or also on the customers on the organization as well. So the customer has a big influence on the organization, because in today's world, via social media, the customer has a very, very big influence, also via the media then. An example can be seen in the quarrel between Siemens and the Fridays for Future people when it comes to this coal project there in Australia, and you realize that. So there is a strong influence of the media, but also of certain kind of lobby groups. Forget about the ADC, but think about other lobby groups like Greenpeace, for example, or Human Rights Watch. And of course, all those kind of groups and stakeholders do strongly influence also your outputs and how the company is seen from the customers. So what are the implications of the systems approach? We discussed that. So what do you need to do? Coordination of the organization's parts is essential for proper functioning of the entire organization. Of course, that's a must, that's clear. But decisions and actions taken in one area of the organization will impact other areas of the organization. But the most important thing is written here: organizations are not self-contained. So they're no islands, but they must adapt to changes in the external environment, because they're influenced by the environment. They have to continuously adapt, and in particular in today's world, we see that, and I think we mentioned that before. We live in a VUCA world. I love that acronym being coined by the US military, which says that we are living in a world which is volatile. Everything is changing so quickly. It's very, very much fluctuating. We're living in a world which is uncertain. So there's a lot of uncertainty. But also the world is more complex than ever before. Complexity. So it's very, very difficult to have an overview about all the information which are available. And it is very ambiguous. So sometimes there's not one clear meaning. There's not one clear message that is that can be found, but different kind of meanings are existing in parallel to each other. And the big implication, like I said, it is that here we have to continuously adapt. And that is also what although we are praying that, and there's a lot of management literature about that, about change management, about innovation management, and also we are dealing with that kind of topic in more depth later on. But looking at the past examples, look at Thomas Cook, look at Nokia, look at Kodak, look at Pan American Airways. Pan American Airways was once the biggest airline of the planet. Now it's gone. Why is it gone? Because simply it's always the same. Look at Blockbuster. Blockbuster was the biggest. I think we mentioned that last time again. Blockbuster was the biggest retailer when it comes to video, so video rental retail in the US and worldwide as well. And they had the opportunity. To buy Netflix, but they refused to do that because they couldn't imagine this to be a profitable business model. Why is that? It's always the same, because they're too much isolated. They're too much self-contained. And in particular, if a company is successful doing or pursuing a certain kind of business model, it is tempted to stick to that to the bitter end, and they fail to see or to sense impulses coming from the outside, from a bigger environment, also from suddenly from new competitors popping up out of nowhere, like Netflix, like Uber, like Airbnb, and those kind of companies. And that is what my colleague Clayton Christensen, the famous Clayton Christensen, was calling disruption. So they are disrupting the market. They are disrupting a market, meaning they are shaking a market, they are redefining a market, and suddenly all that was working well is not working well anymore. So when, for example, look at Airbnb. I mentioned that, I think, one of the last sessions or another course, I forgot that, but Airbnb is selling more accommodations than Hilton does. But Airbnb, they don't own a single hotel room. Now, this is interesting, because that is disrupting the entire market for accommodations. That is meant by that. So although we're talking about management yesterday, and some of these approaches are long dating back, however, they are still relevant today. They are still very, very modern. They are still contemporary. Okay. Any questions, please type in the in chat function. Another approach which is very, very prominent is the so-called contingency approach. It's not rocket science, not a big thing. However, what they're saying, and I like that, it's often called also the situational approach. Because they said, in contrast to Weber, they said there could not be, and there should not be, one universally applicable set of managerial rules or tools by which to manage organizations or enterprises in any kind of situations, because organizations and the environment, it differs. They're so different because we are having this VUCA world, that we always require different ways of managing. Like we're experiencing today, and I admire those companies so quickly reacting and adapting, for example, to the Corona crisis. A friend of mine who runs and owns a lot of St. Gallen business schools, also they reacted very, very quickly, because suddenly all of their traditional business models now are threatened, as in the past they were earning money with or by selling executive education, so providing trainings to managers, face-to-face trainings with trainers and coaches like me. But now, of course, in Corona times, this is problematic. So, like other businesses as well, he lost a lot of turnover, but he quickly manages to get into online trainings as well. So, what is meant by the contingency approach in the end is that that the world is so complex and quickly changing that we could not have one way of doing things, but we need to be continuously adapting to an ever-changing business environment, and we always have different kind of tools that are applicable, different kinds of behavior. It all depends on the situation. Of course, it also depends on the organization size, because if a young enterprise, and on the age, of course, if an enterprise is very young and is comprised of only the founders or small group of bunch of people, right? It is more easy to adapt to a changing business environment because you don't have that many people to be taken on board. If you're a company like such as Siemens, and you have more than 200,000 people working for your organization, it is more tricky, because also you have a lot of internal stakeholders, which we haven't mentioned, which is, for example, the Works Council, Betriebsrat, and of course the Works Council has also a big influence on the decision making. And of course you have environmental uncertainty, we mentioned that, and individual differences, of course, which depend on the branch, which depend on the founder, which depends on multiple other factors as well. Let's talk about some current trends and issues. We can talk forever about that, but let's just highlight the most important things, and we will come back to those later on. So first, and we see that also in the corona crisis, globalization. It's not a trend. It is something which is constituting, which is influencing the macro environment of all enterprises. All organizations are faced with opportunities. So big markets popping up in, for example, in nature, as seen from the Western industrialized countries, but also new challenges, because suddenly you're exposed to new competitors in the global market, and your market, although you may be seeing your market as being regional, but you're exposed to global competition. So you're exposed to global competition. So any kind of market is no longer constrained by any kind of national borders, because we have the internet and we have online business and online sales. A big topic, which we can talk for hours about that, but there's a separate chapter in which we'll discuss managerial ethics. So there's an increased emphasis on ethics, not only education and college curriculums. Unfortunately, at our university, I don't realize that we have many specific courses separately for this kind of question, but we should have, and it's popping up more in Anglo-American countries and overall in curriculums. So the question of to whom is an organization responsible towards? Is it only to the employees? Is it also to a broader environment? So we have, and we should have, an increased creation and use of codes of ethics by which businesses shall comply with. And there's corporate governance, that those kind of principles are becoming more and more important in today's businesses, as the younger generation, the Generation Y and the Generation Z, which will be in, of course, management positions later on, and as customers, and of course employees also, they pay more attention, broadly speaking, of course, to put it into a nutshell, painting a bit black and white now, but they pay more attention to the fact that the employee or that a certain kind of company is more following this kind of CSR, so corporate social responsibility kind of orientation. So for example, a lot of my students, I don't know whether you also belong to that kind of group, but I often like to raise the question and ask the question to them, for which kind of company would you like to work? Would you love to work? What is important? And of course people are saying, yeah, we have an interesting area of responsibility, but also a lot of people, apart from just salary, they're claiming that I don't want to work for a company which is not caring for the environment, which is not so much socially feeling responsible, which is not managed as an open system, which is not so much, like I said, for having a certain kind of code of ethics, etc., etc. So that is becoming more and more important. Another thing which is tried to focus on that in the organizations is workforce diversity. So heterogeneous workforce in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, and age. In particular, gender. We have a lot of discussion about that in the last couple of years, and still I think we can do substantially better when it comes to the inclusion or the percentage of women in management and top management positions. In particular, it said here, in Germany, we are not doing that well compared to other countries. For example, in Scandinavia, you have much more women in top management positions. Much more women in top management positions. It's also a question of politics. It's a question of legislation. But that is, of course, a thing which we are looking at into very much into depth when it comes to human resource management. So how can we get more women in top management positions? How can we best arrange the working conditions to have them balance the private life and the business life in a sophisticated way? And I think there's still a lot of work to do in this respect. Then the big topic, of course, let's call it e-business or electronic business, or let's just call it digitalization. This is the entire digitalization, which is more and more gaining pace, and which will change the working conditions for all of us in the near future, and has already changed that. The work performed by an organization using electronic linkages and its key constituencies. So it's not only e-commerce, but it's also, like I said, you heard about that topic, the Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0, and in this respect, the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, or how you coin that. Everything will be connected to the Internet in the very near future, and already we have dishwashers and television. It's quite used. We are already used to the fact that the television needs an update every once in a while. Not only the smartphone, but the television, but also in the future it will, the car will need it, and the dishwasher, and the air conditioning, and the doorbell, etc., etc., etc. So, but this is all influencing the businesses of companies, the business model of companies, and also the jobs of people. And last but not least, a learning organization, so an organization that has developed the capacity to, and the focus is to continuously learn, adapt, and change. To continuously learn, adapt, and change. Not to change one time, or to innovate one time, but you need to continuously innovate and adapt in order to stay ahead of the game. So these are very, very crucial factors. And I saw that there was a question popping up. I didn't ignore that, from Hanura. Why would you prefer to have women managers, to have female managers? Why? I'm not preferring that. My point is, in general, in literature you see that, and my practical experience tells me that, of course, now it's a bit difficult to argue, but of course women have different kind of virtues, different kind of management style. Of course, it all depends on the individual. However, they pay, and we see that also in the Hofstede studies, which we'll discuss later on when we discuss about international management, when we discuss about the differences in managing US enterprises versus in managing Italian enterprises. So women have different kind of approach to management, so they also have different kind of virtues, and both are needed. So both multiple perspectives are being needed. That is, for example, why at Google you have a very, very interesting approach. Why is Google so innovative? Why is Google so innovative? Because they're all brilliant people there, are those people or other people working for Google more intelligent than the people who are working for, I don't know, 𝗟𝗲, or the people who are working for Zalando? Definitely not. However, what Google is doing right, in my humble opinion, is what they are trying to do. One factor, they hire for diversity. So they hire people with different kind of background. So they don't only hire people with an IT background or with a business background. They hired people who studied physics. They hired people who studied mathematics. They hired people who studied, I don't know, archaeology. And then they put all those people, so very diverse people, diverse group, also across ethnics, across races, across gender, in one room to work on one project. So they have, I don't know, a female Asian, I don't know, lawyer, having paired her with, I don't know, a German engineer, together with the Italian, whatever, an Italian designer, and they're working on the development of Google Maps. So you have different kind of perspectives. So this is also my point about women in management and top management positions. We need all kinds of perspectives on the same problem, in order to emerge stronger from crisis, like we are experiencing now. You don't have a single opinion or a single perspective, but you have multiple perspectives, multiple opinions, and these are required in VUCA world, in VUCA times. Could you give an example of a closed system? So a closed system is, I was mentioning that before, Hanura, that a closed system is an organization which lacks the to realize the interaction it has with its macro environment. So, for example, you can argue that that Nokia, in the end, was managed as a closed system because they failed to realize the trend towards smartphones. Or another example would be Kodak, that they failed to realize and to be sensitive for the trend towards digital photography, and therefore they died. Kodak literally died, right? So they have to adapt, they have to change. And an example, I think I was giving that in another class or in this class last week. A good example can be seen in Fujifilm. Fujifilm survived, although they were in the same industry as Kodak, but Fujifilm adapted, and now they're at the top when it comes to imagery technology in the medical arena. So that is an answer to the question why I would like to have more women, more female managers. So, and there's another question here. Apart from the moral and ethical concerns of not discriminating against certain, it generally seems to be beneficial to have a wide range of experiences. Yeah, that's it. That's my point, Christoph. That is my point. And that is also what all those enterprises are doing very, very well. You just need to have a very good degree, an outstanding degree, but then you're qualified. No matter what you studied, Google is not taking care of that, or Facebook or Amazon, those companies, the digital giants of today's world, but they are paying careful attention to the fact to have multiple perspectives, groups being constituted, being comprised of people with completely different kind of background, different kind of age, different kind of race, different kind of education, different kind of gender. So that is a big point, which also I think, and that was my experience at Shell as well, which also constitutes to this learning organization. Because you have multiple perspectives, you have multiple attitudes, suggestions when it comes to the same kind of problem, you have you're more likely to find innovations. You're more likely to adapt to changing business environment. Okay, so now we have still a couple of slides here when it comes to modern and contemporary management. how is the world around us looking like? And we described that already. So we are exposed to an increasing VUCA trend, or VUCA world. We can see that just looking at the speed of digitalization which is happening. So it's ever increasing. In just 1 minute on the internet, 2.7 billion people who are connected. They generate enormous amounts of data. Just look at that. So, for example, 70 domains are being registered in 1 minute on the internet. So just in 1 minute. 15K songs are being downloaded just on the Apple iTunes store. Or there are 571 new sites, new websites coming out. Or what was very impressive here, 5 million videos are viewed just in 1 minute on the internet, just on the YouTube, not on 𝗕𝗃𝗁𝗃, but just on the YouTube platform. I love that slide graph coming from my friend Professor Kreutzer, and that's a very nice and visually striking example of how the world is speeding up as well, because it took television 38 years to gain 50 million users. It took the internet only 4, and it took Pokemon Go only 19 days. So you can see that the speed of digitalization is ever increasing. And this is, of course, what is deeply impacting the enterprises as well. So the digital change is also reflected in the development of hardware, not only on software, but also on the hardware. And here, this is 5 MB of storage. Back in 1956, it was $120,000, and that is it. Here, interestingly, here you can see, that was transported via a plane from Pan American Airways, which is now insolvent, right? It was the biggest airline on the planet during those days. And now, in today's world, of course, we know that this is only a couple of millimeters here, and the storage is very much less expensive than it used to be. Of course, and that is a famous picture during the Pope election in 2005 compared to 2013. There's a dramatic shift, and still looks a bit strange to me when everybody's holding up the iPad or the mobile phone to record a song or to take a picture. Oh, there are some people here very advanced in 2005, but now it's quite a common picture, which is nicely showing and demonstrating how the world is changing, or how the world has changed already. And probably we end with a slide from my colleague, Professor Scott Galloway. I'm going back to this one. Professor Galloway is an expert from NYU Stern, New York University. And Professor Galloway is predominantly, he's focusing just on the research of 4 digital companies who are the most dominant players right now, not only in their business, but across businesses. So those companies are called he calls the 4 horsemen. He also wrote a book on that. He calls it the 4. And those companies are Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Google. And interestingly, if you add, now it's a bit different because the market share has not dropped, but the market capitalization, of course, decreased. But so will the GDP, of course. But if you add the market capitalization, or if you did that in 2018, if you add the market capitalization of all those entities put together, and the market capitalization is defined as the number of shares times the share price, you arrive at the market capitalization. If you add these together, or just of the 4 companies, this amount is greater, is bigger than the GDP, than the gross domestic product of all countries on the planet except Germany, US, Japan, and China. That is a bit mind-blowing. I think this is an eye-opener, and it shows how the world is changing and who are the most dominant players today, also in terms of management. And this also brings us to ethical questions and to the questions of what is the role, or what shall be the role of the state, and we'll discuss in some later session. But those companies, they are more powerful than all companies before in the past. One last slide. In the past, in 2006, there were companies such as ExxonMobil, General Electric, Microsoft is the only one, I take that out, Citi, and Bank of America. These are the most powerful companies when it comes to market capitalization. And now, what do they all have in common? They're all in the digital. And the only company who survived, basically, who's still in the top, is the Microsoft. So we're experiencing not only a shift, but we're experiencing a tectonic shift when it comes to the macro environment. Everything is moving into digital, and digitalization, like we said, is more than a trend. It is more than a trend. It is shaping and constituting the whole environment that every company is exposed to. So I saw that there was another question, I think, in the chat from somebody. Yes, Christoph. Apart from, I know. There was certain critical. Okay, Pokemon. Yeah, there was somebody just laughing about the Pokemon thing. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's it for today. I stay in the line for a couple of more minutes, but I end the recording here. Thanks very much for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you for another video. Cheers. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.